So I had a viewer direct me to look at Lancaster, Pennsylvania, not to be confused with Lancaster, Ohio. You can see here we're smack dab in the middle of Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Baltimore, all covered on this channel, Scranton. And Lancaster, not a large city. You can see in the modern day we're just about 60,000 people. Go back to the turn of the century, about 40,000, which is decent actually at that time. And we're going to take a look at the architecture. And right out of the gates we are seeing some strangeness going on below the street level. And there is a underground railroad aspect in the official historical narrative having to do with Lancaster at that Civil War period. Of course, here on this channel, if you're familiar, what we do is question the official narrative of history, recognizing that a lot of what we have been told about the past is likely a fiction built up to serve a specific purpose and to serve a narrative that benefits those who are in control in our society. And what you might consider to be old world charm in Lancaster, as we see a modern day photograph of the old style buildings. So a lot of this character that we consider to be from that Victorian era, the suggestion here being it's really a previous civilization, a previous level of consciousness that we no longer exist in, responsible for the construction of much of this architecture. Here on this channel I like to focus in on specific locations. So if you have anywhere you would like me to take a closer look at, put that in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to get to it. Over here we have a watchmaking school. A little bit of a depiction here of what some consider to be a regrading process that went on as a result of a cataclysm here, and then some have termed it the mud flood. Some don't like that term, but there's definitely a curious aspect to a lot of these cities and the regrading, where these buildings go down a lot deeper than you would expect, especially for an early time period where excavation was only really done with shovels and manpower. And that's why we focus on population demographics. It seems such a stretch that the manpower didn't really exist at that time. And then we get depictions of the past where you see everybody dressed up in their Sunday best. You get the streetcars existing almost everywhere, and according to the historical narrative, these really only catch on in the late 1800s. Yet when you look at visuals from that time period, we notice that they were everywhere. It didn't matter how big the town or city was, they just seemed to be a part of the infrastructure, even the width of the roads accounting for this mode of transportation. So there are question marks here. I think there's a problem with the historical narrative. I think we had a bit of a mind wipe going on in what we call the World War II period, where we were sat down in front of the television after World War II, and maybe everything becomes Hollywoodized, and we get a version of history that's basically being beamed straight into our subconscious, and we've been programmed to ridicule anyone who suggests anything other than the official historical narrative. Nice looking central market. The Eastern market, not sure if it's the same or if it's different, but the fact that they would have two, it's pretty incredible. And again, you're seeing the wear and tear on the streets here in Lancaster. And of course the old world suggestion being that much of the architecture that we're seeing, the domes, the columns, the arch, everything has an energetic purpose to it. And there was an element of symbiosis with the etheric energy of the atmosphere that we no longer have access to or are in touch with. So we've lost something down through time. We get strange narratives attached to these structures here. So this is the old courthouse, and the history will tell us that the original building was built between 1852 and 1855. And the north wing was added in 1896 to 1898. And we have another section being added in 1926 to 1927, but really it looking like it's all one building that existed in its original form from its inception, and that these dates have been manufactured to portray a timeline that fits the inheritor's narrative, if you will, that Industrial Revolution and the means at which they were supposed to have had at the time, and of course the amount of people, all of these things. So again, the suggestion here is that the shortened timeline doesn't allow for a lot of what we're seeing here, and of course the lack of certain technologies that only really come about through what we're told as the Industrial Revolutions, stemming from the United Kingdom and the Americas, and being sort of spread throughout the realm in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s. Yet this, again, all of what we're seeing can be found in most places that you look. And another part of that false historical narrative we do get is multiple structures. Here they're telling us this is the old courthouse that predates the one we were just looking at, and you can see the timeline on that one as well. So they were building like this in the 1700s with the tower and all the rest of it as well. It doesn't fit the historical narrative that we are given, and I think it's a part of a falsifying of the timeline. And maybe you're wondering, how is that possible? How could our history be falsified? How could our memory have been wiped so thoroughly? And the suggestion here is being the powers that be have managed to monopolize the flow of information in this realm. And they've done this through the religious organizations. They've done this through control of the governments and control of secret societies. And it's really not such a stretch when you think about how we got to this point. Here we have the First Reformed Church. Still stands. There it is in the modern day. And really anyone who attempts to deviate from that norm of thinking, we have a masterful way of ostracizing those people, casting those people to the margins of society. And even in the literal sense, here we have the main building of the Franklin and Marshall College. Even in the literal sense, we had asylums throughout the realm, massive structures that were being used, inherited, and being used to house anyone that dare go against the historical narrative that was being presented to the people. This is a fantastic looking structure. Certainly not anything we would even attempt to build. And when you come to get a feel for this old world architecture, you can spot it right away in the density of materials that are being used, as opposed to the brutalist architecture that we find in our modern day. And you can ask anyone in the building trades that looks at these structures how labor intensive and time consuming the work would be to conduct any of these types of structures, to build anything like this in the modern day. And then you have problems with resources. How would you be sourcing these materials? How would you be communicating just to source these materials? And then timelines, very short timelines, are given to us in many cases for the build on a lot of these structures. Here we have the Greenwood Cemetery, some strangeness going on in the Greenwood Cemetery in Lancaster, PA. And again, looking at the stonework here, there's a tightness to it that I think would be very difficult for us to duplicate in the modern day. In the multiple column aspect of what they would call the Richardsonian Romanesque styling here at the bottom. Again, an indication of what I consider to be old world architecture. And just a few of the things you're likely to see if you take a stroll through the Greenwood Cemetery in Lancaster. This is very interesting as well. You have a statue as a part of the tombstone. A mausoleum with an Egyptian theme, and again that tight stonework, that textured stone. There's a very, very high quality element to it, which is difficult to duplicate in the modern day. Looking like you have more crypts here, The writing on this crypt doesn't seem to match the quality of the work to my eye. Let me know if you think I'm wrong about that. Something doesn't make sense here to me. Makes you wonder how much goes underground. Several chapel style structures with that nodules on the upper reaches. So our assumption is this is decorative here in the modern day. The assertion in Old World research that this all has an energetic aspect to it. And all of these were a part of a system of energy that all sort of flowed together. Of course, it's all speculation. There's not much we can do. They cornered the market on written history, so all we can do is speculate with the visuals. And I do realize this is quite a stretch for people that aren't familiar with the Old World research, and you may be inclined to run to the comfort of the historical narrative you are familiar with or you are given. And that's fine. That's if that's where you need to be to function, that's fine. But if you're seeking and you're exploring the Old World like me, then you'll appreciate a lot of this architecture as being something much more than what we are told it is. Yet another pyramid in the Lancaster going into the underground. Very interesting. Lancaster, PA. And there's a Civil War veterans remaining. All an interesting part of the narrative. I've talked quite a bit about the American Civil War here on this channel. A lot of questions surrounding what actually occurred during that time. But moving forward to the Grist building. This tall building here. And yeah, I believe that a lot of the timeline on these taller structures is skewed as well. And it's hard to really explain. Like I mentioned earlier, that World War II hinge point factors into maybe what went on. And what I'll do is at the end of this video, I'll put the third part of a conversation I had with Michelle Gibson, where she hypothesizes on what she thinks may have occurred during that time. So stick around for that at the end of this presentation on Lancaster. And just a little street view of the Hamilton Theatre, and the only real evidence I could find of this structure as well. Again, you're having that Richardsonian Romanesque archway construction going on there. And there really is just not enough information in the historical narrative for us to believe what we're being told. And if you're a naysayer, it's likely because you have not looked at the history with a critical eye. Now, my previous video in Canton, Ohio, got the pronunciation wrong in that one, called it Canton, not China, also had a Hamilton watch company. So you see that in both locations. But a massive structure as well, with its towers, of course, clock towers. And an overview of how immense this location was. So manufacturing, obviously, large part of the Old World. Repurposing, I think, going on with a lot of these manufacturing locations. We have high schools that look like city halls, with their bell towers, of course. Very ornate, though. Again, just the amount of time it would have taken to complete the construction on these is part of the problem. And, of course, the fact that they all have basement levels just implies a massive amount of work. Notice, again, the basement levels. This is the hospital, general hospital. And these would be the good folks that are keeping us healthy, the white coats, if you will. Of course, in the modern day, we're questioning all of these things. I'd say it's about time as well. The Hotel Brunswick, I jumped the gun on that. Here it is still standing. Again, having the depth of material, the density of material, showing you the brick and the stone and the details going on up here, all indicative of what I consider to be the Old World as opposed to our New World. And there we have the demolition process in 1967. Alright, we'll move on to the county jail. Looking much like a castle. still stands, and the quality again of construction is what we're looking to me like this one was built in 1851, and I need you to reconcile that with what you're told about the past and what you're seeing here in the quality of the construction itself. And then couple that with the fact that Lancaster at the time had 13,000 people living there. And another piece of evidence to think about while the two top hat gentlemen have their conversation is that it used to have a tower back here, which no longer exists. This would have been a lot taller. So things to think about. No shortage of towers in Lancaster, PA. We have the Franklin and Marshall Theological Seminary. Lark Hall still stands. There it is in the modern day. You have to ask yourself, why would you need to build that? The architects just had that much more sense of flair and style? Or are we dealing with function? Well, you know my answer. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to provide you visuals and tell you what I think. And what I think is fluid. But look at the quality of construction materials, and you judge for yourself. Alright, the library. The Lutheran Church of the Holy Trinity still stands, and here's the upper reaches with the statue work here, all around. Very high quality brickwork. Also notice that the designation on these structures is either religion, government, or fraternal organizations. Or mansions belonging to the very wealthy, who I would suggest are the inheritors of this realm. And the 1800s looks to me like it was a digging out process, a conquering and repurposing and reshaping and overhauling of the narrative, putting dates on the top front of buildings, things like that. This is the Fulton Hall, also known as the Opera House. The statue here in the front. Also here you can see again those lower reaches. So you get the muddy streets, but you have firm sidewalks. Here's the interior of the Fulton Hall Opera House. Still stands. Just a little look at the level of decoration involved in the old world structures. Alright, we have one post office. I also have this designated as the post office. Let's get a better resolution photograph for you. Here we go. I also see it as the City Hall. So I'm probably serving both purposes for a time. They have it designated as the municipal building here. Maybe once upon a time it was designated just the post office. Not sure. Ridiculously over the top, though. And of course this one was built in 1892 as the post office. After doing a little bit of digging here, you can see again the slopes and the grade here. Looking a little bit curious. Certainly overbuilt for a post office, for a city of 40,000 people, less than 40,000 people at the time. Looking like almost like a scaled down version of the Philadelphia City Hall. An amazing structure. Moving on, we have a high school. Again, you have the archways. Just nice looking architecture. This one going back a bit in time, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. I have hypothesized and seen evidence of a lot of these monument areas previously having been central fountain locations. Not sure if that's the case here. That would be my hypothesis because of their location on that energy grid we call the city, the town. More religious buildings, St. Anthony's. No shortage of churches. When you really put it together, how many churches were said to have been built in all these different locations, the bottom falls out of the narrative in a hurry. This is St. James Episcopal. Still stands as well. Take a look at the quality of the brickwork. Not very simplistic. Here's the back end of St. James, just in case you thought it was boring. Yeah. You got ornate brickwork just for the heck of it, I suppose. St. John's Lutheran decided to use stone on the front anyway. We still have a combination of brick and stone surrounding it, copper roofs. You can imagine just the energetics. That is not a cross. That looks to me like some sort of energy receiver. Same thing up here. They told us these were weather vanes or religious symbols, so I would say that's neither. So really, what were these things for? And of course you have the nodules again. Some sort of receiver for harnessing energy is the hypothesis. St. Joseph's Hospital. No slouch itself in the architecture department. There's another look at it. You have the two towers. You have the window looking like a cathedral window, what we'd consider to be a cathedral window. They were just throwing these anywhere at the time, apparently, because it was easy to put a circular window in. And the basement, of course. St. Mary's. St. Paul's. Just throwing churches at you. St. Mary's again. Little look at the interior of St. Mary's. We'll keep moving. I'm getting closer to the end of our file here. A few more to look at. This is the Stevens house. Couldn't find anything else on this one. Multi-storied, basement levels. You can see here down the side. Got half-buried windows. No trace of that now. The Stevens Industrial School still stands. Here we have it in the modern day. Looking a bit lonely and having a bit of a different energy to it, but still retaining some of that old world charm, especially with the tower. This is the train station. This is from 1865, about 20,000 people living in Lancaster at the time. And again, that old world train system. I mentioned the trams, but the trains in general. Suggestion being with the old world that a lot of the old world transportation was devastated in a cataclysm, and a lot of it had to be dug out and reconnected. And these train stations, part of the old world network of transportation as well. And it sure would be nice to have somewhere to lean on where we can just open a book and get the truth about our past. But I think we know that we can't really trust what's been passed down to us. We know that our education system was hijacked by the robber barons, and we know that our perception of reality has been distorted by the same nefarious folks. 1870, this is Lancaster, PA, attempt to depict, I think, what we would more likely think of it looking like at that time. That's why I left it in here, but looking very sort of disheveled. And again, having that, it would be the inheritors look and feel here, 1880. Not really looking like what we see in a lot of these other photographs with those multi-storied ornate structures. So I would suggest this is what they want us to think of as 1880. But when you see a lot of these other structures I'm showing you in this presentation, that's where you really have to scratch your head. This is the Whitmer's Bridge, built in 1792. They were doing this kind of work, apparently, just after the American Revolutionary War. Not sure exactly what happened there. Again, I don't trust history. This is another one of the bridges in the area. If you're local, let me know a little bit more about this one. I just pulled it off a search. Amazing looking structure, though. And we get to the gem, I would suggest, in Lancaster, the old Woolworth Building. And I really, really wish there was more I could show you of this structure. We only have really several depictions from that same angle. So we're looking at a 5-story, 5 and dime store, the Woolworth store. We're probably familiar with the name. We're told it's built in 1990. Definitely feeling like it's much older, even just from these drawings. 5 stories with a roof garden area and these spectacular looking domes on top. Let's take another look here. Unfortunately, this amazing looking building, of course, this having a lot of look and feel to what we see in the World's Fairs, jumping right out at me. Knowing what I know about the World's Fairs and what I've seen. There we have it lit up. Woolworth's building meets its demise in 1949, we're told, and is replaced by, of course, a concrete, iron, and steel structure, Woolworth Building. So that's what we do to these structures, and they'll keep doing it until we really gain enough appreciation to say, as a collective society, to say no more. Stop burning down our churches. Stop demolishing these in the name of progress. Now, urban renewal is really nasty, or has been very nasty, and we've lost a lot of this. And I do realize there's a sadness to that story, but I'm bringing you these to celebrate what once was, in the hopes that maybe we can get closer to that than we are right now. We're closing here on a YMCA. You can see they added this upper floor somewhere along the line. Thanks for watching.
So you're curious about my take on the Philadelphia experiment.
Very much so.
And before I go on to sharing my blog post for what I think caused the cataclysm, I want to say that my journey into doing this work, and I couldn't do it any other way, this is coming from within. It's like everybody I've ever met, every piece of information I've ever encountered has contributed to my coming into doing this work and my own unique insights. And a writer by the name of Peter Moon was one of those early guides, and this is before I started doing my own work or finding my own findings or anything. This was just information that dropped in my lap through things I was impulsed to read or watch, or things that I learned. And I'll have to say, what led me to Peter was learning about the Moors, and it was learning about the Moors that really opened it up for me. The ancient ones, the Moorish Masons, the builders of all of this, who've been removed from history, except for 700 years or so in Spain. That's really all we get. But they built everything, and they were all over. And they were connected to the 12 tribes of Israel. It's all the same, and the controllers just separated everything and fragmented everything and gave it different meanings and inverted everything. But learning about the Moors was what pulled the threads together for me. And so I was looking for information about the Moors, and I was led to Peter's work. And Peter has an interesting story, but he talked a lot about Aleister Crowley in his books. He also talked about the Moors. And I was just hungry for information about the Moors. But Crowley came along with it. And Peter also did a lot of research on the Philadelphia experiment and time travel. And I didn't get into that as much because I was looking for the Moor stuff. But it's kind of stuck in the back of my mind. And about the Montauk Project and time travel experiments that took place there, and so on and so forth. So I got a exposure to Crowley and who he was and how he could have been involved in occulting the timeline. And at the time, it scared me, because in one of Peter's books, he said we were knocked off our original timeline. And by the time I had found Peter's work, I was already aware of a greater spiritual thing happening right now, ascension and all that stuff. And I'm like, unity and everything's great. And then all of a sudden I read, they knocked us off our original timeline. I'm like, what? And so I had this exposure to Crowley as having some level of involvement in occulting the timeline and ceremonies he was involved in, like the Babylon working, and you can look that up. You can find this stuff. The stuff I talk about you can't find, but you can find what he did. And he was also, Peter said, he was also involved in the Philadelphia experiment. And I read that in a book around 2014, somewhere in there, 2014, 2015. Okay. That he, on the day of the Philadelphia experiment, he passed his son through the megalith at Menontoul in Cornwall. And that a line of rough energy went towards Long Island, or in that direction, Montauk. And that there's also evidence in this passage from Peter that there was a connection to the Great Pyramid in Cairo. There was on a ley line. But my focus has been on the ley line between Menontoul and the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully this will give you a complete picture of what I'm talking about, because I really do think that that's not wanting me to share. Let me try that again. Okay. Present. Screen share, maybe. There we go. Here we go. Guess what? Oh, there we go. There we go. Here we go. Okay. I just wasn't pressing the right thing. Okay. So in this, up until this point in this post, I've given a lot of information to build what I'm talking about here. So this is the piece about Crowley that is towards the end of it. And it's just by chance that I even learned about him. So I learned about Crowley from Peter Moon, but he was also mentioned in a book that I read when I was a teenager called The Book of Lists. And Crowley was on a lot of these lists. It's like a very long book of things. And so I can't tell you which list he was on, but that was the first time I heard the name, and then it came back up with Peter. And so who is this guy? He was known openly as the wickedest man in the world. And I think he was directly responsible for bringing us to Crazy Town. And I think he was the agent of malevolent, non-human, parasitic beings who only want what we can provide them and otherwise could care less about us.
Admittedly so, right?
Admittedly. Yeah. And, he called himself the Beast.
Yeah. That's perfectly normal, perfectly sane.
Okay. He was highly involved in Freemasonry and in ceremonial magic, including sex magic, and he was known to be bisexual. He was called the Baphomet within the Ordo Templi Orientis, which was founded in early 20th century by German occultists and modeled after Freemasonry. He called himself that.
Okay.
And he called the Baphomet the divine androgyne and the hieroglyph of divine protection. And I'm not sure where that picture went, but we know who he's talking about, right? I don't know why I have to go back in and put that in. So they're trying to turn us into them, but God created us in his image. And I think he's behind the bizarre agendas that we see playing out today.
Interesting.
And I just put the search term, they want to turn us into them, and that's what came up. And Crowley claimed that when he was honeymooning with his wife in Cairo, he was contacted by a disembodied entity named Iwas, who provided him with the Book of the Law, which became the basis for the Thelema, which was his religious movement. And the first chapter in the United States was in Hollywood, in Los Angeles.
Interesting.
So the basic idea behind it is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. You can do whatever you want without guilt.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what they do hurts people badly.
Mhm.
So some things that came up about his life, there were two points that stuck out. One is that he spent mid-1919 on a climbing holiday in Montauk on the eastern tip of Long Island. And the other was that he was said to have died in December 1st of 1947, and that his ashes were buried under a tree in Hampton in the garden of this occultist. And this guy was his successor as the leader of the outer head of the OTO. And it was also in Hampton, which is was the location of the junction of the Central Railroad of New Jersey and the Delaware. This railroad here was in Hampton. So that's where he was supposed to have been buried. I don't think he was buried there. I think he was still living after this, and I'll show you who I think he was.
Interesting.
So I'm looking at all these different places here in this area, and both of the railroads where the junction is in Hampton, where he was had to have been buried, were part of the anthracite region where the story of where America was built began. And so they were mining anthracite coal, which was a high quality coal, and that was in like between 1765 and 1800. They were after this high quality coal. I think some of my slides just didn't populate here. Maybe that's what's going on here. Let me go here. So that was a location of, here we go. Let's go back to this guy here, right? We know who that is. No, don't go that way. And we're all guided in these different directions. Like I said, I couldn't do research based on what somebody else is saying. I have to do it because I wouldn't do it. Yeah. I mean, this is so deep inside me, Chris. It's like I have to do it.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's like.
Well, it's there, right? Like
it's there.
The Crowley link is very interesting. Very interesting to me.
Okay, so hang on just a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so this is where everything began in the United States, with digging out the canals and getting the railroads up and running so they could get this coal out of there. And I think the coal was also part of the giant trees and so on and so forth. But they were looking for their replacement for the energy grid that they took out. And I also think that there's something very special about coal and carbon that's being kept from us. And I think this place was ground zero for this cataclysm, even though it was worldwide.
Interesting.
Okay, so this is where I talk about the Book of Lists, and like that was published in 1977. That was the first time I saw the name. But that was it. So 36 years later, I moved to Oklahoma. I met a Moorish man. I started learning about the Moors. I followed the trail of information and it led me to Peter. And Peter talked a lot about Aleister Crowley. Okay. So in this one book here, Synchronicity of the Seventh Seal, Peter talked about this ceremony on August 12th of 1943, where he passed his son through this megalith. And so I've encountered two dates in my research for this original experiment. One was July 22nd of 1942. And supposedly what happened was the generators were switched on. This was done in view of the other ships that were there in the Philadelphia Naval Yard. A green haze built up, and then it disappeared, and it came back after 15 minutes. The other date, like I mentioned, is August 12th of 1943, which I think is a good candidate also.
Mhm.
That date is the end of the Lion's Gate.
Yeah.
July 22nd is the heliacal rising of Sirius before the sun. So either date is important astronomically.
Mhm.
And Chad and Adam and I have talked about this theory. And, we've all done a lot of really good research on it. So
Mhm.
I could direct you there
Mhm.
for more information. Okay. So what's interesting is with regards to the alleged Crowley connection with the Philadelphia experiment, I extended the Pine Barrens alignment that I found, connecting the 3 Pine Barrens of New Jersey, central Long Island, and coastal Massachusetts. So where it happened was here. It goes down through all these places. And here we were looking at Cape Cod.
Mhm.
And there's Pine Barrens in this area in Cape Cod and in New Jersey and in coastal Massachusetts, or Long Island and coastal Massachusetts. So it all goes through here. And then in the middle of places like the New Jersey Pine Barrens, you see, rail cars that are in the middle of nowhere.
Mhm.
And you can find them in like swamps in Louisiana. That's a rail car.
Hmm.
I happened to see on a short. I'm like, what? So it goes all the way down there. This ruined land.
Interesting.
Okay. So this is where I started finding the physical evidence to support my belief that the Philadelphia experiment was involved, which started early on in my research. I was mulling that in my head, and that's this time loop between 1492 and 1942.
Mhm.
Okay, and that the Pine Barrens here on New Jersey. So there's a lot of stuff in this whole area, and there's like portals, and you get the Ong's hat and the experiment that was said to have happened there with this interdimensional portal and all this other stuff. So the strange Philadelphia experiment was alleged to have taken place at the Philadelphia Navy Yard in the middle of World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, which started on September 1st in 1939 and ended on September 2nd of 1945, exactly 6 years later.
Wow.
Okay. Okay, so that's a typical portrait of it.
Mhm.
So my question is, did it just become invisible or did it go somewhere else? And I think they sent it back in time.
Interesting.
And that I've been working with this timeline for years.
Mhm.
This solidified in my mind in 2019, in the spring of 2019. And it's like 1717 is right in the middle of a 450-year period between 1492 and 1942 that can be divided evenly into 9 50-year periods.
Mhm.
And at the beginnings of each of these 50-year periods, much was happening in our historical narrative. And I've done that timeline research. I mean, I can give you the receipts. And I started with that timeline research here, an explanation for what happened to the positive timeline of history and associated historical events and anomalies. It's grown since then, but that was my original research, and that was back in November of 2018 that I did that post.
Yep.
Okay, so if you think of those years with 1717 as the midpoint year, it makes a figure 8. It's exactly 225 years on either side.
Mhm.
And that the Lionsgate portal at the end in August would have been that figure 8 is associated with it.
Yeah.
So that would have been like a good time to do it
Yeah.
during the Lionsgate portal to hijack the timeline
Mhm.
and do this time travel thing. And then the midpoint year of 1717 was the year that the Premier Grand Lodge of England was founded on June 24th of 1717, and the first Western Freemason Grand Lodge. It's also the year that they adopted the Analuchus. which adds 4,000 years to the Gregorian calendar.
Interesting.
And so it's also interesting that we've got the Final Countdown movie about a time traveling naval vessel in the field. And they do bring us things to tell us what's been going on. So, again, where did that idea come from? And then that's in 1941. So that's that one of those 50-year years.
Yeah.
And so when I was going deep into this research, I was guided through a psychic friend in 2018 to look at Ireland in 1742 in my research. And one of the things that came up was the premiere of Handel's Messiah in Dublin in April of 1742. And the other thing that came up was the Great Frost of Ireland, which was an extraordinarily cold weather event in Ireland between 1740 and 1741. So, 200 years before the Final Countdown.
Yep. That's interesting.
And that was also the beginning of, so Great Frost of Ireland was taking place in 1740. That same year, the Royal Order of Scotland was founded. And
like the Jesuits.
Look, the Black Sun.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Jesuits came into existence in 1540, so 200 years before that. Yep. The male line of the House of Habsburg ended in 1740 with the death of the Emperor Charles VI. Prior to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire in 1806, as a result of the Napoleonic Wars, it was that house that occupied this throne. And you're getting into a whole lot of things in that 1740, 1748 time period, along with the Great Frost of Ireland. But what's really interesting to me is that was after that. So this is 1740, 1741. In 1744, Rothschild appears. In 1748, Adam Weishaupt appears. And then Francis, Duke of Saxe-Coburg came in 1750, and it was his lineage that became the House of Windsor and how they took that over. So my belief is that the Philadelphia experiment created this Great Frost, and because of that, these guys came in.
Like I opened a gateway almost.
Yeah.
Time schism and a gateway to hijack our timeline.
Right. So that's where I got that idea.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And then in 1839, Rockefeller was born. So these are like up there with the 13 families and wealthiest people of all time, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds.
Yeah.
And then it was shortly after I learned about the cold weather event in Ireland that I was connected by a viewer to someone in the mud flood community, and that was where the mud flood came in. And I started to, because I saw it in my research also, that these photographs exist of clearly something going on in these scenes, in places, railroads, and these guys in jackets and looking kind of rough there. Okay.
Yeah, post cataclysm, definitely. Yeah.
Right. So I'm getting pieces of the puzzle about sound and how sound could have caused this event to happen. I've done my work on circuit board Earth, and I've had that out there for a while. All of the 3 Pine Barren ecosystems are on this alignment here that started in Cornwall. And along the way, if there was a line of rough energy, it would have hit this Pilgrim Monument, which is a bell tower. It's the tallest granite structure in the United States, and granite rings with a bell-like sound when it's struck. So where I think the sound frequency, resonant sound that was inserted, could have come when it hit this and caused the forced resonance, which would have gone through the whole system and could have very well caused all the destruction that we're seeing on the Earth.
Interesting.
Okay. So, and these places have history of railroad. You know, you've got this little tiny sliver of land with the railroad that's not there anymore. You've got the lighthouses. And let's see, so there's just interesting stories. And the place where the Pilgrim Monument is, where I think the line hit, because you're heading towards, Montauk Point. The Brookhaven National Laboratory is in that area. The Wardenclyffe Tower, where Tesla did its experiments, is almost right next to Brookhaven. Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey is close by. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
But Provincetown, where the Pilgrim Monument is, happens to be one of the oldest LGBTQ inclusive places in the country.
That's pretty funny correlation.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Ooh. Trying to scare me here? Whoa. Oh, get rid of that, Michelle.
So I think they were the same person myself.
Wow. Very interesting.
I think they were the same person.
Very interesting. I know there's a good interview footage of Barb Bush from the 80s, and it's quite telling that it's clearly not a woman that we're looking at. But the Bushes are responsible for a lot of the darkness of our time.
Right.
Definitely.
And a lot of people, the story's been out there for a long time that she was his daughter, but I think they were the same. Mm-hmm. I think they were one and the same.
Very interesting.
Okay. So another interesting thing is that it's reputed that one of his children was Billy Shears.
Wow.
That's been believed that yes, Billy Shears
replaced Billy Shears. Yeah, no.
Replaced
maybe
Paul
we should add some context. Yeah, for the Beatles, replaced Paul. Well, 66 is when Paul apparently was killed, according to people that are on that trail, right? And then Billy Shears becomes Paul's replacement, and the Beatles never really performed live again, except for on the rooftop, I think. Yeah.
So this comment was left that pointed me in that direction. And then when I searched for was Billy Shears Aleister Crowley's son, what came up was that Aleister Crowley was one of the figures depicted in the background on the album cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Absolutely. I was going to mention that earlier. Yeah.
Okay. When you look at this tour, the New World Tour in 1993 in Charlotte, and I mentioned this place earlier in this research I was doing, and it looks like the Twin Towers in this here.
Yeah.
In the New World Tour.
Wow.
And then he performs during the opening ceremony of the London Olympics in 2012, when this giant Olympic bell started to toll on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Weird, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That original tour too, in '93. That's not long after Bush Sr. declared the New World Order. A couple years before that as well, right?
So that London Olympics was the same opening ceremony with the creepy dance performance.
Yeah.
With the nurses and the children in hospital cribs and Voldemort looking like a giant Grim Reaper.
Yeah. Infamous now. Yeah.
So another thing, I didn't put it in here because it's like, where do you stop with the information? It's like TMI. There was a Pepper Poppers parade, a Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club parade at the same Olympics.
Really?
And then I gave some examples of other things. So this is
McCartney. I've never been a fan.
So
I'm a Lennon guy. Sorry.
Yeah. So not a surprise to find out the first formal presence of Crowley's OTO in the United States with the Agape Lodge, which would have served Hollywood as it was established in Los Angeles in 1935. Wow. Still in existence.
The direct connection to Hollywood is key here, Michelle, with this research.
Yeah. So even though I've already done a lot of my own research on this, I have to put this together into something entirely new and compelling to make a strong case for it and believable, and how this part of North America was the epicenter for it. But it's not just one thing. There's many aspects to it. And, like I said, I've got ton of research, and I've got more coming to show why I believe this is worthy of consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot there. There's a lot to digest and a lot to consider. But I mean, I really do think World War II is and that time period was like a memory wipe, a consciousness. I don't know, something was scrubbed. I've been looking at a lot into the urban renewal and everything that went on after the fact, and how, in the terms of architecture, because that's my specialty really on my channel is the architecture itself and what they were doing to erase evidence of the previous civilization. So it's interesting because it correlates with that time frame as well, where they really went on the attack to erase a lot of the stuff after World War II. So that's why I wanted you to touch on that as well.
Yeah.
I think I could go forever with you, but I think this is probably a good point to cut it off, and of course I'd like to do it again. Maybe not wait a year this time. Maybe I'll try and reach out to you sooner. And I like to keep up with what you're doing on your channel. There's so much out there to keep up with, but your stuff is right near the top of the list as far as how important the research is in understanding the energy grid, the cataclysm, the previous civilization, and all the rest of it, and your positive message too, that light defeats the darkness, because it can be no other way, really.
Yeah, and I do believe that. I mean, I've got a prep mobile in the back of my car that when I got my GMC Jimmy after I got my pension, because I had a whole bunch of money in my account when it was finally approved, because I didn't get approved the first go round. I had friends of mine build a little camper area so I wouldn't have to sleep in a parking lot again. So I'm set. I'm like, okay, things go south, I'm going somewhere, and I'm going to stay there because they're not going to get my soul. And other things started happening about the same time, and I started to have a much different outlook, and realized that their plans weren't a done deal, and something new was coming in. That was at the end of 2017, and but I was kind of covering my bases, and I was prepared that if things were going to look really bad and something really, really bad was going to happen, I was going to load up everything and just head out somewhere and stay there. So I had a period of, at my level of understanding, knowing all the yucky things that were out there, but then a whole bunch of other things started happening, and there was a synchronistic flow to things coming together for my ability to do this work. And everything was in perfect timing. So it's, we have a much better ending than what was planned for us, but we have a lot of crap to wade through.
We do,
because
but
of what
we can
happened.
do it together. We can do it together, and the more the merrier, right? And that's how I do what I do, and I'm sure that's why you do what you do, is to get this stuff out there. And,
Yeah, exactly. I don't have to do this.
No.
I have to, but I don't. I could make that choice, but I can't make the choice not to do it knowing what I know.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I agree. Me too. All right, let's call it a wrap then. Thanks for joining me, and until next time.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.